have to pay equal attention to the energy consumption when we're not just training the model, but when we're using the model. If you can get the same results by using a smaller model, we have to prioritize using smaller models.
For countries that are not rich, much like in India, frugality is always a key pillar of innovation. Today, I'm delighted to have Ren Ito. Ren Ito is an entrepreneur, investor, and former diplomat. Ren is currently the co-founder and COO of Sakana AI, Japan's fastest unicorn after just 1 year in business, backed by some big names including NVIDIA. And what are your expectations from the India AI Impact Summit?
India is excellent in adaptation to the AI themselves, how we can learn from AI and how we can strengthen the AI. This is a two-way track. This fierce competition is continuing. But does everybody else have to follow the same competition?
That's the thinking in countries like India as well, that you cannot play a deep-pocketed, unlimited resources game with no clear end in sight.
AI is not a winner-takes-all race. We are allowed not to choose one company or one country, which is why we have to make our best efforts to ensure that we are not trapped in this bipolar competition in the AI space. For countries like India, Japan, Europe, we have to have our own technology, the R&D stack, to make sure that we could develop our own models, as well as people are approaching the AI with the right attitude. Digital divide is very difficult to happen because if you start by saying, let's assume that AI is not stealing my job, people will be more willing to adapt to the AI because it's just like using a smartphone. This is giving any workers an opportunity to learn faster. I think for anybody to enjoy the fruit of AI is not too difficult.
Hi, and welcome to today's episode of the AI Futures podcast, The Road to India's AI Impact Summit 2026, where in the run-up to the India AI Impact Summit, we are bringing you some of the world's best thinkers, entrepreneurs, business leaders, policymakers, and academics to talk about what the world of AI is going to mean for all of us, where it's headed, and how we can expect it to evolve over the coming months. And today I'm delighted to have with me Ren Ito. Ren, as we were discussing earlier, it's unique to find people who have worked across the academic, the diplomatic, the business and tech sectors. That intersection is close to my heart, so I'm excited to welcome you to our podcast today. So welcome, Ren.
Thanks, Suri. Thanks so much for having me.
As you and I were discussing, I think the intersection of AI with geopolitics, the intersection of AI with innovation and research, the intersection of AI with policy, all of these intersections are today where I think deep conversations need to be had and multidisciplinary, cross disciplines conversations need to be had. So I'm excited that, today we have the chance of sitting together. You've occupied, I think, different vantage points. So what I want to start us off with, Ren, is to ask you a big picture question, which is to ask you, how have you seen the AI landscape evolve over the last year or so, let's say, since the Paris AI Summit about a year ago? With that as a starting point over the last year, how are you seeing the AI landscape evolve? What are some of the key highlights that you'd like to share?
Sure. I think one of the central questions here is that how different countries or how different companies can approach the AI in a different manner, in a complementary, in a different manner, so that everybody's making their own respective contribution. And then with that in mind, what I'm seeing in the past year or so is that this area of the bigger the better is not for everybody. It's for somebody, of course. So 4 or 5, the handful number of the American or the Chinese hyperscalers, I think there is a good reason that they want to pursue that way. Because clearly, the scaling law is working. The scaling law is not as effective as before, but still, if you have gigantic amount of money, gigantic amount of access to the chips and the data centers, you may want to utilize that. So you name it, OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, XAI. Everybody is now competing with each other to see one of the company become the top company in this month, other companies becoming the top in another month. So this fierce competition is continuing.
Yeah.
But the question is, does everybody else have to follow the same competition? Because one of the things is that this is a number game. If you want to compete with those folks, you have to raise unlimited amount of money, and then you have to keep spending and keep using the electricity and the data center access to make your model bigger. The second thing is, even if you're not following this game, the difference between the top 5 companies and the next 10 companies, of course, the amount of the money you're investing is hugely different. But the question is how different the performance will be. Yes, the top 5 performers are performing extremely well, but the difference can be potentially negligible. Maybe negligible is an exaggeration, but depending on use cases, you don't have to be in the top 5 companies all the time. And another thing is that if you look at the other emerging company from China, France, India, Japan, they're showing their own way of doing the model building. And also, more importantly, how to use the model. So one thing I'm always pondering is, even if you keep chucking in gigantic amount of money into the model making, when do you reach the AGI? I think back in the days, people are saying that we are reaching the AGI in a few years.
Yeah.
But I think it is now becoming a consensus, even among the top guys who believe in the bigger the better, that AGI is coming. It's not coming in a few years. Meaning that if you only invest in the model, it is not coming up with the right solution because the model is not reaching the God level in the next few years. Then what you have to do is a combination of making the model and how to utilize the model. And that's exactly what other companies especially in other countries like ourselves, are prioritizing. We are, of course, making the model, but we don't want to make the model the biggest one in the world, or the most expensive one in the world, or the best one in the world. I think we can be like a switchboard. We are utilizing multiple different models scattered around in the world. And then our real added value is making sure that we utilize these models to deliver the actual solution.
Yeah. No, I think that that's correct. I think that's in many ways the thinking in countries like India as well, that you cannot play a deep pocketed, unlimited resources game with no clear end in sight. And of course, that's been the startup model in many other verticals within technology, right? So many verticals of consumer internet, you saw that venture capitalists would pump in a fair bit of capital over several years, right, to keep the company going in its quest for, customer acquisition and bigger market shares. But at some point, that had to stop, and profitability would become the primary concern. It's unclear in AI how far that point is, because the stakes seem to be so high, especially if you were to believe all the large AI firms, right? So it seems like a multi-year, very, very deep pockets. We've gone from, a few millions to a few billions to now a few hundred billions of dollars in investment. So of course, there has to be a different way for other countries. So I think great, starting points for our conversation, Ren. So now where I want to dig into further is to ask you, before we get into how maybe other countries like Japan and India can actually practically find that niche, right? As you were saying, find their space. To talk a little bit about the US-China tech competition, the geopolitics of it, and more importantly, the implications of it for the rest of the world, right? There's many a talk that we might be headed towards two different sets of AI systems, right? So you have to pick your model, one. Second, there's talk that, there's differences in the Chinese strategy towards AI and the American strategy towards AI. And there's, of course, the larger geopolitical churn in our world that's going on, where every country is trying to figure out, in this new emerging international order, how do we tackle the uncertainty of it all? So given these pieces, Ren, I would love to hear from you on how you feel the geopolitics of our world and the geopolitics of the US-China competition is impacting AI and maybe even the work you do.
I think that everything boils down to this question or the statement that AI is not a winner takes all race. So it's not just US or certain number of US companies, or it's not just only China or certain non-Chinese companies who will triumph the world. I think we can peacefully coexist with so many different countries and companies in the AI space. You have a lot of great things about American AI. The state-of-the-art technology, bigger the model itself is also a very valid point, and a great like application ecosystem. On the other hand, we have a lot to learn from the Chinese mechanism as well. So they are relying on a less performing computing power. So their chips, the chips they're using, is not a state-of-the-art ones, but still they're able to make a great development. We can learn from that. Also, Chinese are generally speaking very good at doing the consumer the products. So given that there are opportunities of being able to make a lot of experiments with the consumer facing applications or the services, I think I should be having a lot of things I should be learning from both China, US, and the rest of the world. And what we have to keep in mind here is that given that we don't have to choose one company or one country, or in other words, we have to enable us not to choose or not to commit to only one company or country. I think that is a reality of the AI space. We are allowed not to choose one company or one country, which is why we have to make our best efforts to ensure that we are not trapped in this bipolar competition in the AI space. What I am suggesting to do for countries like India, Japan, Europe, the rest of the world, is we have to like have our own technology, the R&D stack, to make sure that we can also develop our own models. But at the same time, we have to be excellent in doing the division of labor. We are using this model in that country, another model in a different country, and also our own model. And I think this is giving us the right and healthy balance of being a switchboard or taking advantage of everything we have in the ecosystem. The second step will be how we can come up with the real use cases. And in my approach is identifying your favorite vertical, favorite sector, which you feel that your passion is about, and also you're technically speaking, you're most good at doing it. In that regard, we identified financial industry and defense sector for the priority sectors. And we are starting our delivery to the financial sector, defense sector, et cetera, et cetera. And different countries and different companies have their own creative niche.
I think very well put. I think the idea of, what in diplomacy is called strategic autonomy. In tech terms, it's called, tech sovereignty to some extent being maintained. So having that option of choosing and not being forced into, as you were saying, a bipolar world or a limited set of choices, I think that seems like a right frame for many countries to adopt. But of course, the question becomes, this is not the first time that countries will have been locked into some technology or some technology stack, right? We've seen in the past, for example, if I was to take operating systems as an example, that largely the world ended up with either Android or iOS, right? And then you had the ability to choose between the two, but there were two, right? And those two were both owned by large big tech firms, let's say in one country. What's your sense of, even as countries try to adopt the kind of strategy that you are recommending, what are the areas of that technology stack in AI that you would be most concerned about getting locked into, where 5-10 years from now, you realize that, we don't have any option, but we have to pick?
I think, Suri, I'm a little bit more optimistic in the AI than in the previous internet space. Because if you're looking at the model layer, again, AI has a lot of different stacks. You're starting with the chip making. Chip making will be the basis of running a data center operation. Data center operation is the basis for making models. Model is the basis for doing application. You have a lot of different layers. But the central layer we are talking about now is the model layer. And among the model layer, the reason why I'm getting a little bit more optimistic than the internet space is even if you're looking at a top American AI companies, there are still competition. If you broaden the definition, broaden the scope, there is still a good competition between US and China. If you broaden the spectrum even more, meaning that you don't have to limit yourself to the most top performing models, you have even more, hundreds of models scattered around the world. This is giving me the conviction and assurance that not like the operating system, you are not trapped between one or two viable competitors. I think we have 100 viable competitors. And I like your keyword, the strategic autonomy. In order to give yourself a strategic autonomy, what you need are two things. One, you yourself have your own bread and butter skills. So you have to excel in something. And the second thing is you may want to surround yourself with a lot of different options. Just like the regular geopolitical environment, you may want to maneuver and make all the best efforts in making sure that you wouldn't be trapped into committing yourself only to one company or one country. This is not something your passive attitude can automatically ensure. You have to run extra miles always. Looking around the world, you have to run extra miles to make proactive contribution so that you won't be trapped in that situation.
Yeah, and one of my earlier conversations, Ren, if I may add to that, we discussed the idea of a strategic interdependence, right? Where I think, and that's basically what you're also suggesting, that you create niches within this broader AI ecosystem in any of the layers, right? In any one or more of the layers that you were describing as well, so that there's strategic interdependence between you and another country or you and another company, so that you are not in a position where you have nothing to offer and you're completely dependent, right?
Right.
The idea of, I think, strategic autonomy or the idea of strategic interdependence seems to be a broad frame that countries and companies could adopt as a way to, as you were saying, I think, have a peaceful coexistence in the world of AI and not let it become just purely a arms race in a way. What about on the startups versus big tech firms, Ren? So, you're obviously, I think, on the startup journey right now, even though you've become a large startup, one can argue. But is your sense that compared to the consumer internet world, which saw the emergence of a whole set of new players, right, compared to the tech waves prior? So you saw the emergence of Google, Facebook, many others that weren't there in the 80s to 2000 period in the world of tech. Is your sense that the next 20 years, looking forward, we see a lot of the big tech firms only funding and backing the largest AI startups given the amount of capital required and given the kind of talent required and given the kind of R&D talent required and the kind of salaries that are now required for that? Or is your sense that the rule of creative destruction that's always been there in tech in many ways, do you think that'll continue and you'll see a whole set of new companies, challengers emerge vis-a-vis the existing incumbents?
I think I am intentionally in the middle of the two scenarios you mentioned. But what I say by intentional is I think we have to intentionally create something, middle layer, to make sure that we are not doing either one of them. In my sense, what is slightly missing right now is the middleware. Middleware in a sense of using those ready-made technology either in China or Japan or US for the unique purpose of your country. If I may elaborate a little bit more, for example, you have seen hundreds or thousands of different models scattered around in the AI space, starting with OpenAI in the US, DeepSeek in China, ourselves in Japan. You don't want to just copy and paste and use that for yourself. I mean, yes, as a basic way of using it, it is already a blessing that you have hundreds of ready-made AI you can choose from. But what I say by another layer, the next layer, is you may want to de-bias whatever those models so that you don't have to just automatically and blindly follow the bias those models have. It is no secret that every single model has their own bias based on the culture behind it, or based on the data they have read, or based on the post-training those models are given. And what I'm suggesting is that, of course, the first level, that's fine. Just use hundreds of different models. That's already a blessing. But a second level is that if you have some technology to de-bias those models and making the model back to the clean slate again, or giving your own bias, it's not a bad thing, giving your own bias and overriding the original bias with your own bias, This is one of the many examples of the middle layer or some intermediary technology I mentioned so that the AI technology can develop in a healthy manner.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's exactly bang on. I mean, I've seen examples even coming out of India. You might be familiar with some of them. Sarvam, for example, is an example of a company in India that's trying to do broadly what you are suggesting, right? Where they've taken Indic languages, they've taken the Indian context, the cultural context, the language context, and as you're rightly saying, maybe some Indic biases to overcome the existing biases or the existing lack of multilingual data that the bigger models might suffer from, to create something that's truly tailored for the Indian context. So I think that's the right trend in some examples for sure. The other piece I want to ask you, Ren, given the vantage points you've occupied of diplomacy but also tech, is you've noticed that, for example, in the trading world, in the world of tariffs, in the world of trade, industrial policy, export controls, tariffs, these terms that the world seemed to have forgotten over the last couple of decades are back with a bang. Industrial policy, which had become a word that when I was studying in the US had become almost a bad word in economics for some time, is back. Governments are taking a much bigger role as far as industrial policy, trade, tariffs is concerned. And a similar thing seems to be playing out in the world of AI. So as countries are figuring out that, okay, AI is at the core of your geopolitical and economic competition and tech competition, which is basically, as I was telling you, the main argument in my own book, The Great Tech Game, that countries will start to look at it as the core central arena of competition. The interesting thing is that governments have started assuming a much, much bigger role. So India has an India AI mission. The US government, of course, you see time and time again, either executive orders or laws coming in or guidance coming in. The Chinese, of course, are also very actively, the Chinese government is, of course, known to be very actively involved in shaping the direction of both AI research and AI applications. So, from the vantage points that you've occupied from diplomacy and as a startup founder, how do you see the role of government versus private sector in shaping a country's AI strategy?
Right, right. Suri, that's an excellent question, which always stay at the heart, at my heart, the core part of my heart. And I am seeing very positive evolution of what the government, how the government is assuming their role in the AI space. Of course, nobody is perfect, but it is not too static because if you remember what has been happening since 2023 or 2024 in terms of what the government's priority is, I think back in the days, their priority was very simple. Secure as many NVIDIA chips as possible so that you can distribute that access to the chip to your own country's startups or academic institutions.
Right.
Because the chip itself was such a scarce resources. You have to, on behalf of the country, government have to secure the access to those state-of-the-art chips and giving that. So the access was limited, money was limited. You have no other option but to do that. Once that is settled, I think the global trend of the government's role is shifting. It's not just about securing the basic infrastructure or basic ingredients. Government is now, and it's not just about spraying the money. It's not just about spraying the money or securing the infrastructure. Now government is turning their eyes to what their regulation should look like. I think what was striking in the AI, the Action Summit in France last year, is that it was not an AI regulation summit. Of course, European Union, France, those countries who never compromise on the safety and the standard and all those regulatory part. But I think what was so inspiring from the French summit is that even the country or the economic zone, which is very keen on regulating the AI space, give an equal importance to how they can utilize the AI, how they can push the R&D of the AI. So I think that is another very positive move. And now in 2025 or 2026, which when the India is hosting this impact summit, is about how you can make an impact in the society and co-shaping the course of where the AI is heading between the public and private sector is, I think, is at the heart, the core of what government is thinking. If I may give some the specific examples. It's not just about creating AI industry per se. What I'm seeing in India or France or Japan is always in the context of connecting AI with existing industry sector. So you're talking about how you can strengthen your banking sector with the help of the AI so that Japan can be internationally more competitive. So it's not just about making AI models and then you don't care about the rest. I really see this connection, the intentional connection between AI and the specific industry sector or the company, so that it is strengthening, augmenting, and the empowering the sector, and then making these sectors more competitive is the right course of action. And I think this is where I see the very positive correlation or collaboration between the government and the private sector.
Yeah, no, I think very nicely put. I think the idea of co-shaping, it seems like is inevitable given that a lot of the talent, a lot of the capital will ultimately sit in the private sector. But the government, of course, has an eye on the broader public good and the applications of AI into different sectors such that productivity gains can be achieved, so that efficiency can be gained and competitiveness can be achieved where you might be lagging in a given sector. I mean, we've spoken, Ren, a lot about now the inclusion pillar, in a way, of the India AI Summit. We've spoken about how other countries can be, including in the global south, but even otherwise, be included in this AI game or this AI competition. We've spoken about how the private sector and the public can come together. We've spoken about how startups can find, places in that middleware to complement the big tech firms. Let's talk about sustainability now, right? Which as you might know that planet or sustainability is a big pillar also at the upcoming India AI Impact Summit. In all this quest for bigger and better, we seem to be building and building and building more and more data centers, bigger and bigger models, and these are, of course, as a result, requiring more and more energy. And so you're seeing nuclear becoming a big viable option now to power these data centers. Space is being discussed for hosting data centers, etc. Where do you stand on how you think that the industry should move so that you are achieving progress technologically in the world of AI, because it's exciting, it's fundamentally exciting as a technology, yet not lose the lessons of the past years, past centuries rather, that you don't want to embark on a unsustainable, ecologically harmful path either. So how do you see that way forward in balancing these two goals?
I think that's an excellent question. And what I believe is that we have to pay equal attention to how we make the model, train the model, and how we use the model, the inference. So nowadays, whenever we are talking about, building a small nuclear power plants right next to the data center, that's only in the context of making the model bigger, meaning the training stage. Two things. One, even at the training stage, a company like ours is proposing that no. There should be an alternative way of training the models. The model training doesn't have to be bigger the better only, right? But not only that aspect, I'm turning my eyes to how we are using them. So given that if you're only using the biggest model for your inference, the power consumption is also getting big. Nowadays, you're focusing predominantly more into the model training because that is accounting for more percentage of the data center usage. But in a couple of years, or maybe in a few months, once people are using the models more often and more extensively, which I hope, the new problem pops up, which is we don't have a luxury of only worrying about the model making or model training. We have to equally worry about model using. So this is why if you can get the same results by using biggest model and a smaller model, we have to prioritize using smaller models, if I may simplify.
So there are two options here as I see it. If we take that as a given, the twin goals of sustainability and, let's say, technological advancement in AI as a given, then either the existing companies, whether they are small language companies, small language model companies, or large model companies, right, whether it's a startup or a big tech firm, one option is either for them to continuously work on the efficiency piece here, whether it means inference at the edge, using consumers' devices for the inference piece, etc., etc.? Or is your sense that this creates yet another niche for other companies to come and capture, right? For countries that are not maybe as energy rich or capital rich, where efficiency or frugality, much like in India, frugality is always a key pillar of innovation. It drives innovation in India. Is your sense that a whole set of other companies can emerge, maybe like yourselves, as you were saying, that you're adopting a different approach, not bigger is better, but a smaller and more efficient, exactly what's needed, almost a AI equivalent of the just-in-time production processes, so that you capture a whole different space, whereas the big guys might continue to go for the bigger is better. Say, so is your sense that there might be two parallel approaches here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the right point. I think it have to happen in both arena. The model making have to be less bigger the better. So this itself is becoming more efficient, as you said. And at the same time, this is not enough because still we are relying on a big model if we are only pursuing this way. Another way is that this is what I say by the middleware, or something which I see the more opportunity in countries like India, Europe, or Japan. But you have to be, in a plain language, you have to be a switchboard. You have to take advantage of the very fortunate facts that you have millions of models scattered around in the world, and you can do the division of labor, right?
Are you finding though that capital, see now capital is again a big determinant here, and coming from the venture capital world, you've been in that world now for many years. I was having a similar discussion with Professor Russell from Berkeley, and his view was that, and I think it's largely true, that the capital is still flowing towards the bigger is better approach, right? So unless capital also starts moving and talent starts moving into this other approach that we are discussing, it might be that we might still keep talking about it as a nice thing to have, that yes, we should have these other contrarian approaches, but they never reach the kind of scale that you'd want for them to become mainstream. So is your sense that capital is flowing enough and talent is flowing enough into this other approach?
Absolutely, absolutely. For one big reason, because AGI is not being achieved in a moment. Then, because as far as people were able to believe that AGI is coming tomorrow, yes, the most sensible approach is pumping all the money into the model making. But now it is getting increasing a common sense or the common view among the people in the AI industry that model making itself is not enough. Then we have to think, and the capital flow have to think more strategic or more creatively, which is diversifying from only in this sector into the middle layer, like a model switchboard or the application. Because otherwise, pumping in the money into only one segment in the entire AI space is getting less relevant.
Correct. Let's now move. So we've spoken a little bit about the inclusion piece, a little bit about the sustainability piece. Let's talk about the people here, right? Which is the third pillar of the India Impact Summit. Along with planet and progress, we have people. Now, people are being affected very differently, right, by AI. There are people who are, of course, at the cutting edge, leading, the startups and the large AI companies who have seen their, professional careers blossom. At the other end of this, there are both companies as well as individuals who are very much worried about either being disrupted completely by AI or individuals who are concerned about losing their jobs, right, to AI. We've seen many examples. I don't need to list them out, but we've seen many examples where this is already starting to show up. The most recent example just a few days ago was arising out of Claude. I think Anthropic did a release. The shares of many IT services firms tanked, which of course is a big employer around the world, but especially in a country like India. Where do you see this almost, new winners emerging and new losers emerging in the world of AI? And how might it impact the future of work, the future of jobs, the future of employment in the world?
Right. I think the first question should be whether the AI divide, digital divide equivalent, could happen or not. My sense is that as far as people are approaching the AI with the right attitude, digital divide is very difficult to happen because if you look around and then if you start by saying that let's assume that AI is not stealing my job. People will be more willing to adapt to the AI because it's just like using a smartphone. Adapting yourself to the smartphone is not the most difficult thing to do. So naturally speaking, you have a natural inclination propensity to adapt to the AI. And then I think this is giving any workers an opportunity to learn faster, better, and more efficient. So I think in order for anybody to enjoy the fruit of AI is not too difficult. And then we should encourage them, regardless of their fear of losing job or not, to start with. We have to like ensure that everybody get the better education, better training, and better improvement of their productivity by accessing AI. Then the second stage is something which the policymaker or people in the industry have to be more keen on devising a strategy for. I think the first part is that everybody's basic literacy of AI is going up so that everybody's productivity is going up. After which, you may have to worry that AI is depriving you of your job, or AI might be depriving humanity from the human being. That's about the second phase. In the second phase, I have to admit that some people are better at using AI and others are less better in using AI. Once we are moving to that stage, some discrepancies or disparity in the society could happen or be accelerated. And then we need some policy intervention or some community thinking and devising a strategy to address this issue will be much more needed.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think very correctly framed. I think the basic literacy is almost a prerequisite to competing in the AI age. But after that, also some amount of AI divide will come in. Certain industries will adopt it faster. Certain companies within certain industries will adopt it faster, and so you'll see the survival of the fittest in many ways. But it's coming, so I think it's time for everyone to be in a much more adaptive phase, right? Than sort of sitting back and waiting and watch.
Yeah, so this is why I don't deny that we have to think more creatively in the second phase, but also should not easily dismiss the benefit, the universal benefit of AI, where literally everybody can benefit from the AI.
So then, how do you see AI shaping both culture and also maybe soft power of countries?
Sorry, actually, that's one of the articles I wrote in a newspaper. And then I put the title AI as a soft power. The reason is, I think obviously, as we discussed, AI is not the hard power in my view, because this is not the bigger the better race. This is not being dominated by one single country or company. So it's more about, it's less hard power to start with. But at the same time, when I say the soft power, it has multiple different faces. One is being used by so many different countries or cultures or people matters more. It's a soft power, like a pop music. I think earlier we were discussing about how my AI service can potentially penetrate or being used by the global south. But the number of eyeballs, number of users actually matter. And in order for my services to be welcomed by multiple different people in multiple different countries, it shouldn't have a strongest bias, or it shouldn't force my bias to my audience. So yes, I cannot be free from giving my own bias to my own model. But at the same time, when I'm providing my model to India, Indonesia, Singapore, I make sure that I allowed my dear user to switch on and off and de-bias my bias or adding their own bias. I think that kind of middleware is something which is extremely important in making sure that AI will become the infrastructure for everybody. And this is why, because these eyeballs matter, I see the bigger impact of AI doesn't sit in the hard power AI, but more in the soft power AI.
Yeah. And are you also anticipating, like many people are now talking about how AI is going to change Hollywood and the way movies are made and the way content is created? Is your sense that our pop culture icons 10 years from now are going to look very different than the pop culture icons that we've had over the last, let's say, 2, 3, 4 decades?
Potentially, yes. But I think you always need a curation of the human being. So, for example, maybe AI cannot automatically come up with the next Mickey Mouse. Or AI can come up with hundreds of different ideas, which could be a 22nd century Mickey Mouse. But it have to be a human being, which is picking one, or giving more iteration to the ideas generated by AI. AI is amazing in coming up with a lot more and more different ideas than human being can ever think about. But, and of course, you can let the AI choose one, but I always find a real creative niche for the human being or the division of labor for the human being
Yeah.
being in a position of giving the right instruction, giving the right curation, and making the right choice.
Yeah. Let's move now to global cooperation between countries, Ren. So we've spoken about how companies and countries internally need to prepare for this coming wave. Do you see scope for a lot of global cooperation here? And if so, on which elements do you see, global cooperation can likely move the fastest? Because of course, the other piece that we were alluding to earlier is that there's a great concentration of capital, talent, and resources being allocated to AI in the US and China, of course. But then all the other countries, whether it's a France or a Japan or India or the UK or the UAE, Saudi Arabia, other countries might not have on their own all the talent that they need, all the capital that they need, all the R&D capabilities they need, all the markets that they need. So how do you envision global cooperation to be progressing, and which layers of this would you say that global cooperation can move the fastest on?
I think my 2 cents is that global cooperation is possible and also global cooperation is essential. But we have to do a little bit more creative than the conventional recipe. The conventional recipe of global cooperation is something like, hey, let's put together the same standard, or let's do the division of labor. This company is in charge of manufacturing, this company is in charge of providing services, and then by combining A and B, you can provide a global solution. This is something which we've been discussing for the past 50 years. But I think what we need now is skipping all those conventional methodology or the building blocks. And we have to keep our focus on one single thing, which is how we can make happen the interoperability and interdependence. So it's not just about creating common database, which every single country can access to. I mean, I think the global institutions or international organizations, with due respect to them, will love to talk about, hey, what if we put together another 100 articles, 100 codes of rules, which everybody can adhere to? Or what if every country contributes equally to putting their own data into the common platform as a common infrastructure so that everybody can benefit? I think what is happening in AI space is more organic, more grassroots. So that approach could work or could not work. I don't know. But I think we can, for the time being, pause a little bit and forget about this conventional approach for a little bit and putting our focus on the right thing, the real North Star, which is how we can encourage the different countries might want to utilize the other countries' technology. So this is why, as I said, the intermediary technology or something is a middleware, which allows me to use both Indian model, Chinese model, American models without any hesitation is needed, one of which is debiasing technology. And another geopolitical consideration is that you have to ensure that I can keep making access to Chinese, Indian, European, American technology. So I think it is a little bit more objective or the results oriented. And I don't automatically assume that conventional recipes like this common infrastructure or the common rule setting is the only solution to make this happen.
Yeah. As Professor Joshua Bengio, who I spoke to earlier, said, if you want to be on the table at the AI table, you better have some capability or something you're bringing to the table, right? To your point about interdependence. Otherwise, you'll be the lunch, right?
Yep.
And get eaten at the table. So I think it's important maybe for countries to also develop their capabilities, whether it's in that middle layer or other applications, etc., so that there is some amount of interdependence and you can ensure continued access and interoperability, as you are saying, should be the objectives. But practically speaking, Ren, given that you've also been a diplomat, is your sense that the rest of the world or the other countries or the global south, right, you can group them differently. Are there practical ways for them to come together to ensure this? And if so, what are some of those ways?
I think incentives matter here. Incentives both for the global south and the non-global south countries. For my perspective, Japan is not a part of the global south, like it or not. And what I want to do with the global south countries is that making sure that my technology will be more needed than ever from the global south. So in a selfish manner, the penetration of my technology into the global south in an amicable and a willing manner is a win-win key scenario for making that happen. And global south, of course, has their own unique advantage, but also some problem, which is their resources are constrained than the other countries maybe. And then this is where you need to have the free market of idea. Doesn't matter you're a global south or not. France, Japan, UK, India, they all have to identify what is something which you're good at. I found the defense and financial sector as something which I am good at. I was equally interested in manufacturing, and I'm still is, but as of now, the two areas I identified as my favorite and focus area was finance and defense. And I think every country, every companies are doing their own calculation, their own brainstorming to identify what they're best at. And that can be exported, that can be imported. And this is how the organic and spontaneous global cooperation or interdependence can happen.
And what are your expectations from the India AI Impact Summit, Ren? As you look at the summit that's happened, you're familiar with the Paris Action Summit as we were discussing earlier. What do you hope can come out of this, and what are your expectations from the summit?
I think a French summit was instrumental in bringing people's attention to action, not just regulation. And equally, what India is bringing to this table is about the impact. So now, 2026, as opposed to the previous years, is that everybody is even more keen on identifying how we can make happen the real impact. So if I may use my words from the very beginning, it's not just about the model making. We have to think even more carefully and strongly about how we are using them and making the real impact in the society. At the same time, it's not just about safety and ethics and everything. You have to think more broadly about whatever impact AI is putting or making on a human being. India, I shouldn't do any over simplification, but India is excellent in adaptation. So Indian skilled workers or the engineers are very good at adapting themselves to the AI. So how we can learn from that, how we can learn from AI, and how we can strengthen the AI. So this is a two-way traffic. So I think when India said this summit is about the impact, I am really impressed with that because these are the two different impacts we really have to think about more seriously this year. One is what kind of like a real impact you're making to the solution, and what kind of impact AI is actually bringing to the human being.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, the impact of the human being is, again, we've not had the chance to go deep into it. And in the interest of time, maybe today we won't, but hopefully at the summit we will. The impact on humans, individuals, is also mixed. So you're seeing productivity gains, but now you're also seeing signs of, AI impacting your personal mental health, etc. as well, right? So I think there's, again, much more thinking to be done on the impact on humans as well, which can hopefully happen at the summit when everyone converges there. But Ren, this has been great. I now want to enter very quickly our rapid fire segment, where unlike the deeper conversation we've had, where we ended up going in depth, these are going to be very quick, fast questions and we'll try and have a little bit of fun with it so that people watching can also enjoy the rapid fire segment a bit. I'm going to start us off with some simple ones, and then maybe we'll get some more significant questions in a rapid fire form. So to start us off, Ren, explain the importance of AI to a 15-year-old student in a high school in Tokyo or Delhi or anywhere else.
I think you can be more creative and you can be more different. Yeah, that's my 5 seconds.
If you were talking to a 20-year-old college student today in Japan, let's say, what would you advise them to study? Would you advise them to study engineering and technology and the STEM disciplines or the humanities?
I would rather say humanity. Yeah, of course, you have to pick up the basic skills of computer science and mathematics and AI and machine learning, everything. But I think it is now the time when the humanities study is more important than ever. Because the real question is how you want to use AI. It's not just about what is the specifics of your skills of using AI, but you have to think as a human being. What is the purpose of AI? What is the purpose of a human being? What is the division of labor between yourself and others, or human being or the AI? So I think humanity question, whenever I'm running this business day to day, surprisingly, my major back in uni in a liberal arts, humanity, helps me. And then this is one of the topics which always come up in my day-to-day discussion and conversation with my team members.
Yeah. I also did a liberal arts undergrad degree, and so I couldn't agree more. But that's maybe our biases as those who studied liberal arts.
You have to have the technology to de-bias something coming from me or you.
That's right. That's right. Continuing with this question, are we going to live in a world of generalists, you think, or are we going to continue to see a world dominated by specialists?
I think the humanity question is leading to my preliminary conclusion that this will be a generalist world because what matters the most is how to use AI and what is the division of labor. But at the same time, the specific skill sets of doing an AI and developing AI is even more important than any other period in the past. So it's not a bipolar world between generalist and the specialist, but sorry to be so boring, but we need both.
Yeah. And I think even within an individual, of course, you can have a society with many generalists and many specialists. But I think my own sense on this is that even if you are a generalist, you've got to have some amount of vertical depth specialization. And then even if you're a specialist, you've got to have at least some amount of generalist type understanding of the world and the various disciplines in the world. Which is in a way what you're saying, which is like a mix in a way.
That contrast is amazing because in my day-to-day of speaking with my team members and colleagues, I as a generalist are even more keen on understanding the specialist skills and their domain knowledge. And the specialists are never living in a silo. They're so anxious, they're so keen on opening the doors and understanding where their specific skills are leading this society to.
Now we're going to move on to a little bit on the policy side. And my first question on that front, Ren, is something I've just come up with because of your background, which is if you are now a young foreign service diplomat, you were talking to one, what would you advise them to how to plan their career differently, given the rise of tech and AI and geopolitics? One. And also, how would you advise them to incorporate that into their own training?
Right. I think I have two things. One is, for sure, technology is now getting the new key pillar in the foreign policy making. So even when I was in the foreign service, yes, cybersecurity is one of the agenda, technological cooperation, but still the central agenda was security and the trade negotiation and cultural diplomacy, etc., etc. I think now, finally, the technology is now what was established as one of the biggest pillars in discussing the foreign policy. So this is a must. It's not optional. We have to understand this international dynamics centered around this issue of technology. So this is a must-have. The second thing, my favorite word in running this company is greatness cannot be planned. So this is usually targeted to the engineers and researchers. They cannot come up with the greatest idea immediately. They do a trial and error, they do inspire each other, and it cannot be planned. After strange turn of events, you land in great idea. So you have to stay flexible, you have to explore, you have to have a mindset of explore more, because greatness is not something which can be planned in advance. I think same things can be said true for your career development. I wish I could say you should join the foreign service in the first year, leaving in 3.5 years, moving to investment banking, consulting, and then AI. But it's not the thing. It's not the recipe. I think the only thing we can do is stay curious and stay very flexible and agile.
As I think, I'm forgetting who said this, but yeah, stay hungry, stay foolish in some ways.
That's yeah.
Yeah. Are we in an AI bubble?
I don't know. I think you can argue in many different ways, and I'm not a macroeconomist, but I think what we have to do is, for example, diversifying people's attention and the capital flow, not just into the big model making, into the middleware, into the division of labor, into the application, into the vertical AI. So I think the healthy balance is, in any case, the way forward.
Yeah. Ren, I love that. I think the diplomacy has not left you. You might have left the world of diplomacy, but you're able to find balance in most things. I'm going to mention countries now. And in the context of AI strategy, AI capabilities, tell me the one word or two words that come to mind
Okay.
as far as their strengths or your perception of their strengths are concerned. America, so the US,
The state of the art,
China,
consumer facing solutions,
Japan,
open source and key industry,
France,
one of the champions in Europe, and very long term view.
Australia,
I love to explore more.
India,
Adoption.
and what about, let's say, Saudi Arabia?
I think it's a new frontier and a huge willingness to be the next pillar, the next center point in the AI space. Like
Singapore?
Singapore, so the great, the regional hub. And I think the greatest minds are rushing to Singapore. And I think they have great potential of serving the AI solutions as an intermediary.
No, great. You did very well on that. Not an easy one for a diplomat, ex-diplomat to answer in one word. So thanks for bearing with us on that. And finally, some personal questions. So which applications of AI are you using the most? Other than, of course, your own.
I'm using like the major AI services on an equal basis. So I'm using ChatGPT, I'm using Claude, I'm using Google Gemini, I'm using Sakana, I'm using DeepSeek. So the key is, if you are able to surround yourself with as many options as possible and getting to understand their strengths and some differences, I think that's the most fun part.
No, agreed. I think going back to your switchboard analogy, who are the ultimate decision makers according to you right now in shaping the future path of AI? Corporations, governments, or consumers?
I think the current geopolitical argument says now we're entering the period of time where the big countries and big companies matter. So big countries and big companies are shaping the world order more than any other period of time in history. I think which is true, but we shouldn't let that happen too obviously. What we need is that the people, small to mid-sized companies, should make its own impact and changing that big tide of the direction.
which thinker of AI, thinker about AI, it could be a researcher, it could be an entrepreneur, it could be an investor or a government leader, which thinker in the world has shaped your thinking around AI the most?
I have to say, one of my co-founders, the guy named Lion Jones, he is one of the 8 authors of the Transformer paper. He is a source of my day-to-day inspiration because I'm sitting right next to him every day. What he says is fun, which is he's a guy who created a transformer, the current AI architecture. And he goes like, why we are sticking to this architecture, which is already old enough. We have to come up with a different architecture. This is a very bold bet, but it also shows that we shouldn't take it for granted that a current architecture of the AI, including bigger the better, is the ultimate and final shape of AI.
Great. And this is what we end with, Ren, a fascinating conversation, which is books that you'd recommend, people who are listening to our podcast, books that they'd read. And second would be podcast guests that you'd recommend for us.
Right. The book I recommend, obviously, is this Greatness Cannot Be Planned. I really like that concept. My favorite novel is the Kazuo Ishiguro's novel about AI. The guy who I want to invite to the podcast, I like to invite one of my mentors here in London. By the way, I live in London. I live both in London and Tokyo. I don't know if I can publicly say, but he is a retired bishop of the Anglican Church, named the Bishop Michael Marshall. He was a bishop in my nearby church. And we are having this monthly conversation and dinner. And he is over 80 years old. And he's all curious about the relationship between AI and spirituality. And that conversation is just fascinating. And
that would be incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's an aspect that I have actually neither for the Great Tech Game podcast that I run nor the AI Futures one. That's an angle that's a dimension of this conversation that I've not delved into. So that's a great recommendation. You know that you were also recommended by one of the earlier guests. So thank you for that. By Anne Bovero.
Right.
Envoy,
That's a great friend.
for the last summit. So thanks for that great recommendation. This has been a lot of fun, Ren. I've enjoyed that we've covered a lot of deep questions around AI, but with a smile on our faces and with a sense of optimism about the future and a sense of inclusion, for big and small companies, big and small countries, and hopefully for a more sustainable AI future. So thank you again for being with us, and I look forward to seeing you at the AI Summit.
Yes, same here. We're looking forward, and thanks for having me.